Chinese envoy has now been holding talks with North Korea on its nuclear program, a move that President Trump has hailed as positive for diplomacy. For more insight on this, I want to bring in Fox News foreign policy analyst, Kyron Skinner. Good afternoon, Kyron. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for inviting me.
So big picture here, do you think that the president's Asia tour helped America's standing on the global stage or hurt it, or do we come out sort of neutral?
Tested the America First idea in his two-week tour of Asia, and the way he has described it, it is a doctrine that's committed to putting America's interests first, not those of multilateral agreements or transnational actors or bureaucrats in Belgium, but the interest of the United States. But at the same time, he's encouraged other nations to put their interests first, and then coming together, finding the capacity for mutual agreement around shared values. That's a very different approach than prior Democratic and Republican administrations that have relied on international fora to help decide on what the interests of nations are. President Trump was talking as much to allies and potential Asian allies on his tour about really figuring out rigorously what their interests are. And as the more he talked, the more they came to the common understanding that the big threat in the region to everyone's national security, not just in Asia but around the globe, is North Korea's nuclear and intercontinental ballistic missile programs.
So it sounds like you're describing a shift away from multilateralism towards bilateral relationships that is nation to nation. On that front, a remarkable development I think that we've seen is China's agreement to send an envoy to Pyongyang. What do you make of that? Why do you think now? Do you think that is a direct consequence of President Trump's heavy-handed approach to dealing with the region, or is this nothing to do with President Trump?
So just let me take this in two parts. Your first point about a shift away from multilateralism, I think there's a combination of both bilateral activities and agreements and understandings and multilateral activities. Both happened in the context of the Asia trip. On the bilateral side, the president was just amazingly aggressive in going nation by nation, doing the hard work of talking with partners about the threats that they commonly face. On the multilateral side, you know, the concept of Quad, the four nations, the United States, Australia, India, and Japan, having talks among that group about the common threats and how they may coordinate as a counter to China. So I think there are elements of both in what the United States is doing now. But in terms of your second point on the issue of the envoy, the Chinese envoy in North Korea, I do think we have something to do with it. Mr. Song Tao has already this month been in Vietnam and Laos, explaining the 19th Communist Party Congress in China, what it meant. So there's this expectation that he would go on to North Korea as well. But I think the tenor and the conversation has been influenced by the way in which President Trump clarified both in his Asia tour and throughout the year, the problem of North Korea, and that the only pathway forward for peace and stability in Northeast Asia is to have a denuclearized North Korea.
And Kyron, so we've got to leave it there.
We're important in that way.
We've got to leave it there for today, but we'll have you back soon, hopefully, to talk about the fact that they haven't launched any missiles in the last 2 months. Also an important development.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much.
Importance of steadily developing traditional friendly ties between Pyongyang and Beijing. That's according to state media reports from the regime, and the envoy is said to have even presented a gift for Kim Jong-un to a senior North Korean official.
Chinese President Xi Jinping's special envoy will visit North Korea on Friday and is expected to meet with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un.
Thank you very much. During our visit, President Xi pledged to faithfully implement United Nations Security Council resolutions on North Korea and to use his great economic influence over the regime to achieve our common goal of a denuclearized Korean Peninsula. President Xi recognizes that a nuclear North Korea is a grave threat to China, and we agree that we would not accept a so-called freeze-for-freeze agreement like those that have consistently failed in the past. We made that time is running out, and we made it clear. And all options remain on the table.
Not just the Chinese media, but even North Korea's state-operated news media reported the meeting as the top story. Song Tao, the Chinese special envoy to Pyongyang, met with Choi Dong-hae, a senior official of the regime, on Friday. According to Korean Central News Agency's Saturday report, Song asserted that it's the Communist Party of China's stance to, quote, steadily develop the traditional friendly relations between the two parties and countries. The report added that Song conveyed a gift for Kim Jong-un to Choi. And while nothing is confirmed, diplomatic sources say the Chinese envoy may meet with the North Korean leader during his trip to deliver President Xi Jinping's personal letter. Song's visit to Pyongyang comes amid tense relations between the two traditional allies over North Korea's continued nuclear and missile provocations. On paper, the Chinese government says the objective of the Chinese envoy's visit to North Korea is to inform the North of the outcome of the recent Party Congress of the CPC, which cemented President Xi's reign over the next 5 years. However, observers are predicting such a move might be China trying to start up its diplomatic arbitration again, especially as Pyongyang has not conducted a provocation in more than 60 days. Another thing to note is that Song's trip to Pyongyang is taking place just over a week after the summit between Chinese President Xi and US President Trump in Beijing. Regarding China sending an envoy to North Korea, Trump expressed his expectations for the meeting, tweeting that it's a big move and that he anticipates seeing what happens. However, in its editorial, China's state-owned Global Times warned against hastily making any assumptions or conclusions, saying, quote, Song is not a magician, and that it's up to Washington and Pyongyang to de-escalate tensions on the Korean peninsula. And while it has been expected that Song will return to Beijing on Monday, the Global Times said his itinerary in Pyongyang is subject to change. Hwang Ho-jun, Arirang News.